Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Hail adventurers, it's time for episode 107 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind, our weekly podcast dedicated to Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and its community. This week, we're delving into a dungeon, talking tab target, checking in on some content creators, and ending it off with our next piece of ogre lore. Prepare yourselves, mercenaries, explorers, and heroes. We're delving deep today. So join me, Tezrin, and my dungeoneering co-host, Theric, as we wander the depths of this week's Rewind. Oh man, I'm really excited about today's episode.
I know you are. I know you are.
And I don't want to spoil it, but it's so funny to me how last week I jokingly mentioned, we'd cover the last part of the newsletter since this is usually kind of one of the, it's a dry week, right? This is our dry week for Pantheon news. And in the back of my mind, I just had this wouldn't it be cool if his idea, right? And come to find out, you had the same idea and now we get to do it.
Well, yeah, I'd like to. When I came up with the idea this week and I was writing it out, I'm like, oh, this is so, this is novel. This is new. This is a new way of doing something we haven't done before. Yeah. And then talking to you, I'm like, maybe this wasn't entirely the creative spark of my own. This might have been, the seed might have been planted by Desert last week. So, hey man,
we're
whatever,
just that in sync. I think we've done this, a good amount of time now. So we're just together in this together and having the same ideas. It's great, man.
Yeah, sharing a Pantheon brain.
That's perfect. Well, so this is particularly important to this week's show. We need to introduce our awesome adventuring party, and so this week we've got Ziplocks on the Darkmer Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wiki Woo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Horsosaurus on the Human Warrior, Mujin on the Scar Beard Lord, Anton on the Darkmer Summoner, Daimlos on the Darkmer Cleric, Dave Bowers on the Human Ranger, Fury Wrath on the Archai Summoner. Woo, new racing class. Yep.
Getting that bonus.
And actually, in the same vein, we've got Theldrin on the Darkmer Paladin as well. So, making use of that new character sheet.
I'm so excited. Yeah. I know. I'm so excited that people took us up on the idea from last week where we talked about getting that extra adventure party time if you chose one of the new class race combinations. Yeah. So cool that Fury Wrath and Theldrin both did that.
Yeah, and we'll have a tank and a DPS for a nice extended amount of time there. But yeah, thank you as always, just for all your support of this podcast, this platform, and us in general. This show's admittedly it often very fun, I would say, to do, and
often
especially today, and you guys are really just affirmation that we aren't the only ones having fun with it. So
right,
it's always so appreciated, and of course, if you want to join this adventuring party, you can do so by using that super chat feature during the YouTube premiere or by donating on Patreon, which gives a more permanent seat on the party if you can't make the premiere. So, oh man, now that we've listed our companions, I am just I'm so excited for this next segment. So I think we should do it.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. Okay, so like Desmond said, no VR news items this week in terms of official updates or anything, but the new VIP Developer Roundtable happened on Friday, June 24th, which means it'll be available to the public on Friday, July 1st. That means, of course, we'll be covering that for you all next week. So this week, I thought we could do something a little different for this segment because in the June newsletter, VR included a section called the Pantheon Dungeon Experience. This was more or less what, Christopher Perkins was reaffirming some design philosophies of, what's guiding them when they're crafting dungeons in Pantheon. So there's nothing really new, although there are a couple little beans, but we'll get into that. But it was mostly just a solid refresher of what Pantheon's all about. And that's, that's always nice to hear, especially for folks that are just discovering the project more recently. So what we're going to do is today we're going to take this week's adventure party, so all the folks we listed, as well as our listeners, for a good old-fashioned dungeon crawl. We're going to use some of the key quotes from the newsletter to try and demonstrate what we think this will look like. So I want everybody to turn on your visualization skills right now. And if you're watching the video on Rewind, we've got some screenshots to go along to help sort of paint the picture. But we're going to take a deep delve and we're going to head into the Dungeon of the Rewind. Okay, so we've zoned in, and before we make our first pull, we need to make sure we're agreed on really who's doing what, because this dungeon is deadly, and if we get down deep enough, it can be a real pain to recover whatever coin and whatever you have in your inventory, so we don't want that. So Joppa told us about dungeons. He said they're, quote, social contracts of teamwork, and the all-important element of tension. So, Desrin, you've got the direct healing covered as a druid, right? And if you need buffs from our human enchanter, WikiWoo, do you want to just let us know what it is now?
I mean, well, I really hope he's got Whispers of Tyseer going, because I'm sure we'll all need that's delicious mana regen. But
yes.
But mainly, I really think he should just put his Light Wisp on the tank. It might get really dark in here, and so we want to keep our eyes peeled, right?
Yeah, we need that spell. Put that wisp on the shoulder, WikiWoo, and get us some light so we can see what we're doing as well. Make sure that mana regen is going. And now we need to figure out who's leading tonight. So I'm gonna nominate Shuriken, our dwarf cleric, who's gonna be directing us and making sure we're listening to all their calls. And then let's get Horsasaurus, our human warrior, designated as the main tank, and Theldrin as the Darkmer Paladin as the off tank. Now, Horsasaurus says they can pull, so get those assist macros set up. And Theldrin's going to call out the secondary target if needed. And let's listen for that. And Daimlos, since you're on the cleric, you're going to be about getting those barriers set up, because we talked about last week how the clerics are the masters of barrier healing, if you will. And Des, you're going to keep those tanks alive, right?
I'm going to try.
Yeah, right. As we can all do. That's the best we can all do. And so we've got our roles designated, and Shuriken says it's time to start moving. So if you guys see that large chamber head, let's head in there. Wow, this place is massive. There's hallways like all over the place. There's stairs leading up to a second level. I think we could even drop down because it looks like there's like a mist-soaked area of some sort below us. And I also see that there's quite a few other groups in here too. You know, everyone seems to be milling about and they have different places they're trying to get to. So I'm wondering if our rogue, you can scout ahead and see where we want to go. Because you'll remember in the newsletter, Joppa talked about this and they said, quote, dungeons should be places players can inhabit and explore in an open, non-linear fashion. A dungeon's crafted in a non-linear way to encourage exploration. The nooks and crannies, the traps, the hidden doors, the passageways deep under a flooded trench, the magical talisman that fits into the strange and easy to overlook indentation in the wall, the places you can climb or swim to, the items and abilities that help you traverse across to previously inaccessible areas, and all of this without a mini-map or a predefined path to guide you, end quote. So, keeping that all in mind, Ziplocs, what I'm hearing is that the second hallway on your right, there's some stairs going down that we can explore, but there's also a group of ratkin there we're going to need to deal with. So, Desrin, what do you think? How should we approach this situation?
Well, we've got plenty of defenses and utility, I think. We don't seem to have a lot of damage, so I think we should take this one nice and steady. So like, let's see how many we can mez. While maybe Theldrin grabs any stragglers that Horsasaurus isn't on. Now remember, the more mobs that are fighting together, the more they can interact and combo with the intelligent AI in Pantheon, and so it's going to make the fight more difficult if we start adding more. But we want to separate what we can and take out priority targets first. And it looks like one of those ratkin is an alarmist, so let's try to pacify that one first, or this might get out of hand real quick. All right, time to ready up.
Yeah, good call out on the alarmist there. I like that, and nice work, team. I think that was a good strategy, and we got those ratkin down. And Des, you did some great healing and some nice mezzing there from WikiWoo on the enchanter. Now, these guys were a bit below our level at level 10 here, but it's always good to warm up before we get into the really challenging stuff and get our bearings and get a feel for our group roles and that kind of stuff. So down the stairs, there's actually another group down there, another group of players. But they don't seem too interested in these mobs, and I can see now as we get a little closer, they're actually level 40ish, so they're way above us. They're doing different stuff. They must be trying to get maybe down to the heart of the dungeon, because I hear there's some sort of sleeping giant down there. You never know. But hey, Des, hold on, come over here for a second. Just come close and check out this guy's armor. Look at this dialer that I'm checking out.
Whoa, that's insane. He looks awesome.
Right? I mean, it's awesome to be able to see stuff like that. And this actually goes to what Joppa said in the newsletter. They said, quote, having content of various level ranges across each of our dungeons. For the lower level players, they get to see higher level players in action with their awesome gear and abilities. They may also see higher level players accessing parts of the dungeon through higher climbing skills or special items and abilities that the lower level player can't access yet. For the higher level players, it provides a sense of prestige to show off your gear, your abilities, and your knowledge in the context of adventure, not just being gawked at while standing around in a city, as well as the opportunity to provide a helping hand. So what do you think, Des? Should we try and follow them? Should we try and find another path? What's the plan?
Well, I just sent that Dire Lord a tell to kind of let him know, just he looked really cool. And he said they were heading down to a really deep crevasse that requires some pretty hefty climbing skill. And I don't think we're ready for that. Not to mention, what we'd probably run into down there.
Right. Yeah, you got to realize some of these places we can't get to for a reason, probably for a good reason. So we should probably keep on moving. So let's just keep on going here. Okay, so we've come to a bridge and it's spanning this really long chasm. I don't like what I'm hearing here. I'm hearing some sounds. There's a howling wind. And then off in the distance, I can see some air sort of rippling with heat, when you see that. And I think we're in for some elemental issues here. And hold on. You know what? Mujin, our beard lord, says they've been here before and they brought some glyphs for everyone to equip because that wind shear effect is pretty nasty. So let's equip those glyphs and we'll worry about the scorching area when we get there. This reminds me something else that Joppa said in the newsletter when talking about these kinds of situations. He said, acclimating to various climates you might find within the dungeon, and you may encounter multiple within the same dungeon, will be one way we unfold access to certain areas and develop key themes regarding the lore and various characters or events within our dungeons, end quote. So Desrin, you're a druid. You're in touch with the natural world here. We've got our glyphs from Mujin. What advice can you give us on dealing with these types of dungeon barriers?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit out of my element down here. But it has been noted that we'll probably run into all sorts of puzzles and barriers, and some we might get through by a kind of keying process, but others we might have to acclimate to or solve something for, or even use perception. Actually, I'm really hoping that we might find something very important to my class down here for a storyline that I'm working on. A Spriggan sent me to this dungeon actually to locate what might be a lesser tendril of the world root, they said. And I've been carrying around this piece of verdant shard for ages, and so who knows? Maybe if we find one, it'll let me port us somewhere else in the dungeon. Maybe, I don't know.
That is awesome, man. I hope we find that. I would be totally jazzed to help you find that. And you never know. Who knows what we're gonna find down here? But yeah, let's keep going. Let's move on. And okay, so now we've come to this sort of heat rippling area and the scorching climate, and we've got our human ranger Dave Bowers, who is scouting and says we're going to need our DPSs here to step up, because the way you get past this heat is actually coming from what's known as a fracture, and there's 6 heat vents that need to be destroyed simultaneously. So let's get our DPSers. Let's get Sparrow on the Ranger, and Dave also on the Ranger, and myself playing a Ranger. Aim for the 3 on the left, And let's get Anton, Fury, and Fury Wrath on the summoners. I want you guys to send your Archmental pets over to get the other two on the other side. And that last one on that side, Bounty Code, you're going to send that Meteor Fireball you like so much to blow up that final one. So so send that sucker off and blow those things up. And, Joppa talked about this situation, this kind of a situation in the newsletter too, when he said, quote, fractures are similar to climates in that they will affect players in a certain area by applying various benefits or detriments based on the type of fracture. One difference is that fractures will emanate from the location of the fracture itself and affect the area surrounding the fracture. The range of effect will vary based on the type of strengthened fracture. They will often be used to create environmental riddles for the players to circumvent or mitigate through the use of certain abilities, special artifact items, etc. End quote. So that's been done now. Let's get across this bridge while we can.
And I'm really glad Mugen brought those acclamation glyphs, or this bridge would be way harder.
Right, totally. It's always good to have somebody thinking ahead here. Okay, so on to the next area of the dungeon. Well, so what is this? It looks like it's some sort of atrium. We definitely reached a different part of the dungeon now, and it's more constructed. It's not as natural looking. There's what looks like some chambers below, like a railed walkway. There's some waterways flowing through the room and a staircase on the other side of the room. Hold on, our bard says that there's songs of a rare creature that wanders in this area. But the name has kind of been forgotten to time. Screech does say that the room is known. It's known as the Laughing Pools. And keep that loot ready, Screech, because there's lots of wraiths actually patrolling around down here now that we can get in a little closer, we can see. So perhaps we need to clear some of those trash mobs out of the way.
Wait, what trash mobs? Trash mobs?
Wait. Yeah, there's no such thing as trash mobs, actually, according to Joppa. He did say, quote, first of all, we don't really consider any NPCs in dungeons or raid areas to be trash mobs. Whether it be uncovering more lore about the area, gaining mastery experience or rare items, etc., there will be ample reason to engage with NPCs that aren't directly part of the boss encounter. Yes, you read that correctly. Rare and powerful items will not always come from bosses in Pantheon. End quote. Whew, that's music to my elven ears, Desrin. And knowing that you can get good stuff from regular mobs, that's going to keep me dungeon crawling for years. How about you?
Dude, totally. Like, while I think we'll always have better luck getting the good stuff from bosses, it's just good to know that with some luck, and we might be killing other enemies, and it won't just be for XP. Plus, who knows? Maybe we'll kill a placeholder or something.
Totally. Yeah, no, for sure. So that's a little side conversation. But wait a minute, Des. Did you see that? That wraith that came through the alcove over there. It's way bigger than the others. There seems to be it seems to have a pretty vicious looking scepter in its hand, and I'm hearing like a hissing. It sounds like it's hissing something. It's like moths or something like that. I'd say it's in charge of this place, but you never know, because Joppa did say, quote, you'll encounter bosses within dungeons in various ways. Some bosses will always be present as a direct spawn without a placeholder. These will typically be more bosses that have a lore consistent reason for being regularly present. However, these bosses may not always be in the same location all the time. They could have a chance to spawn in one of many locations, or have paths that roam with the ability to spawn anywhere on that path. Other bosses may have placeholders associated with them, or require a certain event or the use of a certain item before they will spawn, or they may have a chance to spawn only at night or during a certain type of weather. So our clerics, Daimos and Shuriken, they say that scepter is high on their list of wants. So let's pull that thing before it wanders off.
Just look out. I mean, I've heard that some race have a trait that gives them a chance to cripple if you miss weapon attacks. So melee folks, just make sure your skill levels with your weapons are as high as possible here.
And good. So we took it down. We took down that named wraith, the boss wraith, and Daimlos. Hey man, congrats on winning the scepter. Luck's on your side today, it seems. And Desrin, you were mentioning earlier you're on the hunt for a storyline, but hey, while we're here, are there any keepers that are working on other storylines? I know there's one called Memories of Hirith. And so WikiWoo says they believe that this there might be a ghost, the ghost of Kieran, the Ward of Flame, one of the halfling wards in this area based on what they've heard. So let's take a look around, because in the newsletter, Joppa talked about this, and he said, quote, "Bosses will not be the only thing you may seek inside a dungeon. Rare task and storyline NPCs will have a chance to spawn in dungeons, as well as other unique non-boss NPCs that may be difficult to find could have extremely valuable rewards for doing so." So there it is. There's the ghost. Interestingly, I spoke to that ghost and it wouldn't tell me much, but WikiWoo says they've got a long tale on how the halflings came to defeat from the Laughing Wraith. So for me, I guess I need to uncover more story, or maybe I'm missing an item in my inventory. Maybe I just haven't developed my perception skills enough. It's that flagging system that VR's talked about. So, I guess I'll just have to come back another time, or maybe WikiWoo can help me out with completing that storyline for myself. Joppa talked about this in the newsletter when he said, quote, "Players who develop their skills within the perception system will be poised to glean much more knowledge about the dungeon's place in the world, its history, and maybe even things to expect in the future. Additionally, keepers will have abilities that allow them to discern important information about NPCs, find secret passageways, and uncover the secrets behind certain triggerable events." Whew, okay, well, we took that down, and that's it for this dungeon crawl, but Desmond, did you have a good time?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't quite get what I was looking for, but also, one of the drops was pretty equivalent to an item I was trying to get from another dungeon, so it works out. As the newsletter said, sometimes, there might be a important piece of gear that drops from a specific rare or like a long respawn boss, there might be an equivalent or similar items that give you an alternative option for itemization that might drop elsewhere. So while I didn't get the exact drop I like, this is a good substitute. But overall,
nice.
This was great. I can't wait to go back and see what else this dungeon has to offer. I mean, I'm sure there's so much in there that we didn't see.
Totally. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is the whole thing. We're going to go back and, we can take other paths. We can explore other areas. We can look for other mobs. We can come back when we have more information on our storylines. And like you said, hunt for that drop that we didn't get this time. So
absolutely.
Great dungeon crawl, man.
Yeah.
Thank you to our adventure party for coming along and being a part of it. And you guys did great. So okay, so back to Desrin and Theric conversation. That was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy that. Again, it's sort of trying something new, so you never know how it's gonna land. But we'd like to do something like this again if you guys are up for it. So hope you enjoyed that. Let's talk quickly about what's going on here at Pantheon Plus this week. We are still, as always, grinding out content along with our friends. So here's what's on the docket for the week of July 27th through to July 3rd. Now, Monday night, there's no EQ midnight stream from Drac because he's on vacation. Well-deserved, as always. But CryptFox will be streaming Final Fantasy XIV on his Twitch channel, so check that out at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tuesday, 9 p.m., we've got the MMO 101, as always. But Sparrow is taking over the stream this week. She's hosting it on her Twitch channel. So be sure to check out all of us. Playing EverQuest again. We're in Unrest right now, and I think we're moving into the main house area, which is very fun. And Wednesday, I know it says Sparrow is streaming Elder Scrolls Online on the calendar you're seeing, but she's actually not. She's taking that Wednesday off. Thursday, RedbeardFlynn has a video coming out about new MMOs in 2022. And hopefully he can unearth some good ones. So we'll see. On Friday, our friend Benonai, Pantheon fan fiction extraordinaire Benonai, has a new story coming to Pantheon.plus, so on our website. So that'll go up in the morning. It's called Lion's Prophecy. And that is been a while since we've read anything from Ben and I, so I'm looking forward to seeing that and reading that. Sparrow will be back streaming on Friday night on doing P99 on her Twitch channel. Of course, Saturday night, late night viewing, 11 p.m. Eastern, Nathan Napalm is doing Cringe Pony TV, back for another episode of that. And that's the week, but there's one more thing, and that's a special event that Drac is hosting on July 3rd. It's called 8 Hours of Power, and it's basically it's for people who want to jump back into EverQuest, but if you maybe felt like you were too far behind. Well, they're going to be doing some power leveling by abusing the holiday experience bonus that EverQuest gives out to power level members of the community. So if you want to start a level 1 toon and basically zoom up to max level or pretty close, send Dracatel, let him know that you're interested. It's again July 3rd, 5 p.m. Eastern to 1 a.m. in the morning. And that should be lots of fun for all you EQ fanatics and late night gamers. And the last thing I want to say is I want to personally thank everyone out there for making the perception video that I made this week so successful. I cannot believe how many people have checked it out. I really tried to get in and respond to all the comments on it and get the discussion actually going. And it actually raised a ton of points I hadn't considered. So it was really cool. And I'm glad everybody liked it so much. I'm working on a new one about storylines that's going to incorporate some of these points from that conversation, as well as some points from the last roundtable and some stuff actually from this newsletter that we just reviewed. So that's going to be up in a couple weeks. Stay tuned for that. And that's it for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right, really cool discussion this week that's, I would say, pretty relevant to the show. And that's the idea of reducing the distance you can tab target in the dark. This was originally posted on the official forums by user Hokanu, and it was later promoted by the official Pantheon account on Twitter. Now, the question is pretty simple. Should VR limit the range that you can tab target when the area is considered dark, be it just natural darkness or otherwise? Now, Hokanu says it puts kind of more emphasis on the other senses, like hearing, rather than falling back on the UI to know what's around you. And it might even give room for some cool buffs that counteract it to some degree, or allow you to pick up sounds over a longer distance and things like that. So off the cuff, I think it's a really cool idea. It reminds me of something straight out of D&D, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's a very old school kind of idea and sort of perception-y based, like not in the sense of perception from a Pantheon system, but just in the ability to perceive things in your surroundings. So I like it as an idea.
Yeah, we'll get into the details. We got plenty of responses on this. This thread's actually hopping. So first one I'll grab is Disposalist. And they say it certainly would make sense to not be able to game the system by using tab targeting to effectively see in the dark. And also adds, if they can do it, it would make sense to not be able to tab target stuff that isn't visible in your display for any reason, like if you're blinded or looking the wrong way even. So gaming the system, I want to throw in random robs here because it's kind of like the same thing, just kind of proving the point. And so Random Rob points out that they totally do this all the time in EQ. They just smash the tab key while running through dangerous places to circumvent the visibility, right? As he says, a mechanic that prevents that would force me to appreciate the dangerous surroundings more. And I mean, like that seems totally Pantheon to me, man.
Yeah, it does. See, I think this is where I would probably take it and as far as I would go with it, actually, because it's a mechanical thing that I think, prevents, keeps you more immersed because you're not just utilizing a system that allows you to sort of circumvent visibility, like Random Rob said. I think that's exactly what's going on here. If you're going to go farther with it and you're going to make it into like a game thing, like, are you going to actually, I know people don't like the word gamify it, but are you going to gamify it? That's where I maybe would pump the brakes a little bit and say, no, I'm not exactly sure. Like, this seems like a basic function of the game. Like, it seems like the only reason you can do this in EverQuest is because they don't do anything to EverQuest.
They don't stop you.
Well, that's right. And they don't make any effort to sort of like, address these kinds of things.
Well,
anymore.
yeah. And I think this is just like the reason that this was so surprising to me was because it's just so prevalent. I mean, Like I literally do this
Yeah.
in like EQ2, even when it's not dark. Like just
Yeah. And like a lot of games, even like whatever, you can just do this and you can see like the outlines, if they're behind like a wall or something like that, or they're down, like if they're on like a lower level, you can
yeah.
oftentimes just, it's a tool that is way too much of an advantage for the player.
Yeah, and I think that the thing you kind of pointed out there is that it's like a tool. It's like a UI thing, right? And so when we're talking about immersion, I think anything that pulls the character or the player more just to look at a UI thing,
Yeah.
it kind of pulls a little bit of
You know,
immersion out, you know?
Well, you know what it is. You said D&D right off the hop, and I knew there was something, but it's infravision, right? So everybody's an elf apparently because you
Oh,
can see in the dark,
yes, yep,
right?
yep,
You can see warm outlines of people in the dark. Remember, that's like a D&D skill
yep.
that I always had it on my whenever I played like a D&D based game and I would play an elf. I loved that ability because I was like, yeah, I want to see things in the dark that nobody else can see for
Yeah,
sure.
and but it just kind of becomes this like standard thing. So when everyone can do that, it's just like kind of takes away from that uniqueness, like yeah.
I think we just solved the problem. Give it to elves. Don't give it to
Whoa, whoa,
anybody else.
whoa, whoa. Okay. Um well, let's so let me get to a post by MFR1 who starts pointing out that there might be some technical difficulties with like how they might measure light in game, like does a torch count, or in the case we're just talking about, if a race has some kind of dark vision, which currently I will point out it's not a thing that a certain race has dark vision, as far as we know, but if that did happen, but yeah, they also bring up like latency, which I'll be honest, I'm hoping that won't be too much of a big issue with vinyl. Latency as in like they brought up like line of sight issues when like a mob is like right in front of you because they were technically out of line of sight, half a second ago.
Right.
Yeah, I really hope that is a issue of the past. But
I think it would be a pretty big technical challenge, saying that with no real knowledge of how to program this kind of a thing. But it seems to me, measuring light in an area, and then assigning that to your ability to see the mob would be really hard to implement. And so the other thing is, like, think about this from like a functional perspective. When you're fighting in a dungeon, I mean, basically you're up close or at least within a reasonable range of the mob at most times. So you're going to be able to target them just by clicking on them. You're not going to need to tab target. The only time you're going to need to tab target really is when if you're trying to pull from like a great distance, right? So if I'm like a ranged puller, and this doesn't even apply to like body pulling, right? If I'm trying to pull with ranged weapons or something, or a spell, then this would be relevant. But otherwise, it's not really that relevant. I mean,
we will get
seem like maybe
to clicking and stuff like that. But I think a little bit of what you're talking about is a bit of just kind of degrees, right? If it's so restrictive that you can't have someone range pull, or that like, you can't tab to something that you should be able to see just fine. That's all a matter of tuning, degrees of which they implement it. But I think actually on the topic of measuring light, I think it's actually very doable, because as long as there's a number somewhere, it can be used. And there are plenty of numbers in a renderer that give off how much light is in a scene at a different point. Now, they could make it a more mechanical thing and separate that out, but I think it's actually very possible to do something like this.
Yeah.
Oh, and so Counterflesh, do you have something else? Okay.
No, go ahead.
So Counterflesh adds some kind of interesting bits, and like maybe they could expand this variability to the size of the mob as well, where a large creature could be tabbed to from a great distance, but smaller creatures would have to be closer. And also as kind of a balancing thing, a player that's invisible or stealthed might have a slightly reduced tab range, just for a little bit of extra risk when they're trying to sneak into some rather dangerous places. And we might be slippery sloping here a little bit into like, other things, but it is kind of connected, I think, to the general topic of how do you bake in that kind of danger and immersion, but danger into a system that can't just be that a player can't just mechanically get out of, right?
Override.
Just because it's a game.
Well, you mentioned slippery slope, and I was thinking about, okay, so we've done this for darkness. What about fog? Do we do this for fog?
I would
now?
expect so, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're going to make it, it's got to be consistent, mechanically consistent through the world, right? If I can't see somebody in the darkness, I can't see them in the fog either. So it should have the same effect should apply in that situation. Or, are we talking about, other situations? We know that there will be underwater stuff. We saw that the well pond in Sorhirith. There's going to be underwater. So are we going to be able to see underwater? Is it a variable of depth, now as well? So you can definitely slippery slope this.
Yeah, and I do think if they did something like this, it would have to be consistent, right? Something that you can rely on and know that if I go into the deep water where it's dark, I'm not going to be able to see as much, as in I'm not going to be able to just find mobs that are around me as quickly, which gives me less time to react if I get within aggro range or something like that, right?
Right.
But it would have to be consistent. So that's a great call out. But this also kind of led into a bit of a parallel discussion about being able to select mobs that you can't tab to. Like you mentioned, you would just click on things, right? And a lot of games do this, which in a way that would circumvent this system as well. It's like, I can't tab to it, but if I just, click in the darkness, but it kind of made me realize as much as I do this naturally in a lot of games, I would actually love if Pantheon didn't allow you to select something that wasn't in your tab target range. Again, I would expect that to be a number somewhere. So if it's outside of that range, maybe you can't select the mob. Maybe you just have to see an outline of something. It looks like a werewolf, but I can't know until I get a little bit closer, which is riskier, right? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because that kind of goes into, they had another tweet on their Twitter account this week about, scary things in games, like what's scary, what jump scares. This kind of goes along with that, because what this would promote is you got to get close. You got to get close and see what's there. It makes scouting a much more valuable ability if you can't tab target something because you can't see it, or even click on it because you can't see it. I would go the other way. I would say, you can't tab target to it, but I would say if I see an outline or something and I can't even make it out, but I see it in the distance, I should still be able to click on it, right? If I can see it, the player can see it, like me, I should be able to select it with my mouse, not necessarily tab target to it, because I think that makes it a little bit too easy, but I wouldn't go as far as you. I think what you were saying, as far as you've gone with it.
I think maybe if you can see it and make it out visually, like if you already know, that obviously looks like a knoll or something. I mean, that's probably within the range that you should be able to click on it. But again, it's kind of a degree of balance, I think the point is, if you can't already tell what it is, the game shouldn't just deliver you that information, right?
Yeah, you gotta make an effort to determine what it is.
And I think that's kind of the overall point, which I agree with. The specifics of how far they take it is, that's all balancing and stuff. But yeah, if you can already tell what it is, you should be able to tell what it is.
but then maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else, right? Maybe it looks like a werewolf, but you get close and it's it's a friendly.
Maybe. There's all sorts of surprise that could come with that, and then if you do mix that with the whole large and small creatures having slightly different, ranges as well. I mean, it would at least let you be able to see large creatures from further away, which might be a good thing.
Can you imagine if they remember those spiders in Hellner Cave that we've seen on stream? What if they shrunk those down and make them super small, and the only way to target them, because they're so small you can't click on them, you had to tab target, and if the system was in place and you had to get right up close.
See, I think that that would feel bad to me. I think that
probably would feel pretty bad.
It would be kind of terrifying, right? Which is,
it would also be more annoying.
Yeah, I think the terrifying would get exchanged for annoying very quickly. So but again, a matter of degrees. I just kind of think if you can see it visually, okay, yeah, you should be able to select it. But this is more about just limiting that mechanical circumvention of this is supposed to be scary and you're not supposed to know what's out in the dark. And so,
that's the idea.
Yeah. Well, then one other thing that kind of got brought up that's another related note, but it's kind of tangential. But I like that this is all kind of combined into the major topic we're talking about. And that's something that Vandrad said. And I'll admit, I'd love to see this. And that's that when it's dark, either like nighttime or just in a dark place, and you carry a light source, like a torch or like an enchanter's wisp, like we mentioned earlier, or a ranger's burning arrow that they've mentioned before, and you use those things to see better, that it should also increase the radius that mobs can see you as well. So this, kind of combined with the reduced tab target range when it's dark, I think adds this kind of crazy flavor of tension where you get more range from a torch. Obviously, you can tab further out if you have a torch, but it doesn't just outright trivialize the darkness. It increases the danger a little bit in a different way.
Yeah. Well, and that's always the fear of carrying a torch. When you think about like, scary movies or places where there's high tension, you sacrifice some safety when you carry a torch, but you also, what's the trade-off you're making, and I like the idea of like two sort of circles that can contract and expand, like one around you and then one around the mob, right? So the mob's, circle expands, the more light you have. Meanwhile, so does yours until, you basically, those circles are going to overlap at some point, and that's the next like, where things get crazy, right?
Well, I love that because if you're, going into a difficult or scary place, and obviously we're going to want light sources in dungeons. That's a for sure thing. But with the knowledge that the rogue that's like not carrying a torch can, they'll not be able to like tab around as far. Being, separated from the party or something like that. But they can do, like you said, it really adds to that scouting gameplay and really adds a purpose around light other than just restriction. It's actually to reinforce a certain role that I don't know, like we really haven't had in such a strong capacity in an MMO like this. And I think this whole idea, as long as, the matters of degrees that they implement it are fair. So, if you're in torch range, and because they can see you from further away, they're coming out of the dark when like there's no way you could have selected them or something. Right. That's annoying, obviously. But I think the whole point is the circles get closer, when you're taking that risk. So if you see something, or you're able to tab to it or click on it or something, you have less time to react. Like it means you have to be careful when you have a torch rather than less careful.
Yes.
Tasty.
It's good. It's good. It is tasty. I like it.
But yeah, man, I have to admit, like I have this bit of a love-hate relationship with tab target too. And this has been coming up like more and more, specifically as I play EQ2. Like, dude, how many times I've hit tab and it like targets something across the room, or behind me, or whatever. Like it is crazy, man. And I'm tanking mostly. Like my main character in that is tanking right now. And so the worst thing is like, okay, I'll tab, try to find the next guy that's right in front of me, and it'll select something across the room. And next thing you know, someone's shot an arrow across the room, and it happens all the time, and it's so frustrating. And I know Pantheon has a lot of big ideas that'll like, super shake up the genre, but if they could just improve tab targeting.
Yeah, there was a guy somebody in the comments on the video that I posted this week said they were really cool. Like they sounded like a cool system, but they were just done with tab target games. I was like, like I don't really feel that strongly about them. I know when they're good and I know when it's bad. In EverQuest right now, playing old EverQuest, it's horrible. Like I don't know why, but it just doesn't work properly anymore. And I don't know. But then I played games that it works absolutely fine, and I have no problem
Yeah.
with it. And you can designate, target, what does tab do? Does it target the closest enemy, the farthest enemy? You can sort of set all kinds of like qualifiers for what you're tabbing to,
It
and
helps.
I think
Yeah.
I think it helps a lot, and I think it makes it completely tolerable. And I have no problem with a tab target game. And I mean, because when you're getting in frantic situations, being able to separate out the mobs is pretty essential, especially when you're dealing with roles and group roles and targets and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
And I mean, that it's kind of like a secondary benefit to all these things we've been talking about, though, because essentially what it would mean is if you're trying to select the next guy right next to you, it's definitely not going to select the guy across the room because your character doesn't have vision of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. That is a really, really good point, because it actually is it's sort of an auto fix for a problem, or a setting that is actually contained within the gameplay.
Yeah,
right?
just kind of thought about that actually, but yeah, hey, a little secondary thing that could come out of all these things, but man, yeah, if they could just generally improve tab target, I mean, all these other like ideas from this thread I'm really having a good time with it. Just I think it would really enhance the dungeon experience. I know a lot of people really don't like darkness in their games, but I think mechanically speaking, Pantheon has a lot of things that go along with it, right? It's not just darkness for darkness' sake. And I think that's why I really like this idea, is because instead of it's making it a meaningful thing that affects other parts of gameplay that cause you to act in a certain way that makes you more immersed. I know that's a long way of putting that, but like,
yeah. But we've seen that consistently in their gameplay streams. They've talked about this consistently. How utilizing light and darkness for gameplay effect is very much very high.
For sure. List. Well, I mean, I'd love to see this, whether or not it's something they can do, soon or later or ever. But overall, there's a lot of responses, both on the official forums and on Twitter. So it's a great discussion. A lot of other, side things are coming up out of this, which is really great. And it really does, I think it touches on a lot of what I think might make Pantheon the best dungeon experience of an MMO, really. And everyone go get your thoughts in. Obviously, links are in the show notes for I think I put the forum post in there, but there's also a Twitter as well. And that will be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, Community Spotlight time. We've got a nice little handful of things to talk about, or at least touch on, shout out, whatever you want to call it this week. Now, the first one is actually a Benonai piece. and so this is Amensol's Focus, Elements of Surprise, Chapter 9. And it's up on Pantheon.plus. I think I was talking to Benonai, and I actually didn't know this because apparently he has like different parts and chapters and stuff. So I think on the forums it says part 10 or something. But anyway, I haven't read the whole thing yet. I just read the little not excerpt, but his intro. It's a very thoughtful intro. It's a great little shout out to the whole lore plus community, as they say. And
nice lore plus.
Yeah, because there's some collaboration happening. I even saw the mention of Crowsinger, and I don't know. It's just really cool to see that intermingling of the fan fiction, and everyone just really appreciates how JN writes. And
yeah, totally, man. That's what it's all about. That's what I'm here for.
Well, on the video side, we've got a RedbeardFlynn video, and I really liked this one. So it's titled, "Is Alpha This Year Still Possible? 6 months of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen updates." And it's a recap. It's a recap video. But he did such a good job, man. Yeah.
The best part about this video is the confidence meter going up and down and the little sound effects that go with it. Although they weren't consistent, which kind of bugged me, because there's the down one changed at the third time it happened or something like that. So I was gonna give him a little bit of a hard time on that, but it's really it's fun to see his journey through the first 6 months of whether he feels like they're gonna get to alpha this year or
Right.
not.
I think it was a very fair video, a great recap, really. But also, yeah, just very real. Oh yeah, our confidence goes up, goes down. It's just how it goes. We respond to the information we have, right? And so excellent job, Redbeard. I think it's probably, in my opinion, like his best video yet, but I don't want to.
Well, that's saying something.
And speaking of videos, someone we haven't heard from in a little while, Sir Medieval, put out another Pantheon video.
One of your favorites.
I mean, just for his coverage of New World and Valheim. I mean, he's the one I heard about Valheim from, so I'm a little bit of a fan for that.
Oh, I see.
But and he's a lore guy, so I think yes. I don't know if he's delved deep in Pantheon yet, but once he starts finding your videos, man, I think he's gonna.
I did leave a comment on the video, so I hopefully. Maybe we can connect at some point with Sir Medieval. That'd be great.
I would love to. Yeah, he seems like a very cool guy.
His video was really good. It was super comprehensive.
Right, and I should probably tell everyone what it was called, huh? It's called, and this is super clickbaity. I'll be honest, but I mean that's how you kind of have to do things. This is YouTube after all. But it says, so many new details. Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, MMORPG, made developer roundtable full breakdown. And it was quite a breakdown. I'm really glad he went through the roundtable, right? I was expecting, people watch like the dev stream or whatever. Some people catch up on the newsletter. But I was really stoked that he went through this roundtable because, the roundtable was great. But he picked out a lot of good pieces from it, too.
Totally. Yeah, it was really, really well done.
Well, then the last thing, I just kind of wanted to give a quick little poke here, because Pantheon showed up on this article called The 14 Most Anticipated MMOs in Development in 2022. And this is by MMORPG.gg, which is not to be confused with MMORPG.com. I do this all the time.
I was confused at first, actually. Yeah, I was confused.
Yeah, different logos, different websites, different writers, as is very obvious. That sounded really salty. It was a little bit. But yeah, this is actually listing. It's so great. I love lists like this because it's not just like grabbing the low-hanging fruit of like, here are all the, big AAA, whatever, and we put it into a list and, clickbait, whatever. Mm-hmm. This has a bunch of very indie games on it. I mean, it also has big ones, Ashes of Creation, Star Citizen, and but Pantheon shows up, I think, in the number 3 slot. I don't know if that matters, right? I don't know if it was like a.
I don't think it was a ranked list. I think it was more like
just a list. But they had a little quick thing to say about it. They kind of said something about crafting that wasn't entirely true, but
yeah. But that's what you're going to get with some of these more peripheral kind of websites that aren't really paying as close attention. We sort of give a hard time to Massively a lot sometimes, but they've been way better in terms of following it more closely and getting the details right. So I want to give some shout outs to that. So, some of these websites like this one, maybe just not following it as closely as.
So I have a good bit of leniency for this, right? But all in all, it's just great to be on the list right next to some really big ones and some other indie ones. I think it was a very fair list. And so if you want to check out that article, leave a comment and stuff. So shout out our community here. But that is going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. The Clan, the Tome, the Victor. Last week we learned how these 3 virtues came to define ogre culture. We learned about the 7 tomes of war, about the clans of Gorok, the ogre homeworld, and about Rothuk, the Black Moon King, who's been lost to his people along with the tomes. This week, we learn what an ogre without these virtues must endure on Terminus. So follow along to the words of J.N. Gerhardt as we listen to this week's Lore You Know.
The Dawn.
Yet, if the three virtues are the very heart of every ogre, what becomes of those who've had them ripped from their chest? What is virtuous for one who has no clan, no tome, and therefore no means of victory? If all that is real is removed, are they even ogre anymore? From the perspective of Broken Maw, these outcasts are not. Outcasts known as the Dawn. Historians often define the ogre word Dawn to mean homeless, or a similar variant. This is an error, as the true meaning lies beyond that category. The oversight may be due to the unfamiliarity with the ogre root word for home, which is something of a hybrid that means tome land. On their native planet, the tomes of war were the basis for each clan's existence, their claim to territory and legitimacy. Therefore, whatever land the home was in, the tome was in, without exception. Throughout the 7 clans, there are many wretched souls, murderers, slavers, and the like. Yet these individuals are afforded refuge, or even honor, within their own clan, despite what the larger population may think of them. To be Dawn, however, is to have no place among any of these groups. There is no larger body to bleed on your behalf, or dare another clan to exact justice for your crimes. Dawn exist without heritage, and are severed from their lineage. No clan, no tome, no victor. Indeed, they are even marked for death by other ogres, who are permitted to kill their excommunicated brethren without cause or fear of retribution. This anchors the reality that Dawn possess none of the 3 virtues, and therefore will not be defended as those who do. In a very ogre sense, Dawn live outside existence, without a past, present, or future. The Dire. Atop a hill known simply as the Mouth, a young Arakamel watched as his father was led in pitch-soaked cords to the edge of a large crater. Located on the outskirts of Broken Maw, the Mouth was so named after the gaping pit that sat at its summit, a vast fissure that made the hill look as if it were screaming at the sky. From this height, the bodies of countless enemies had been tossed, fed to the unknown beast that roamed in the cavernous depths below. Arakamel trudged beneath torchlight, his 2 older brothers alongside, to the very edge of the yawning pit. In the daylight, the Mouth was a strange monolith, but at night, it somehow seemed alive, as if it could swallow them all if it so desired. Arakamel stood wide-eyed as his father was commanded to kneel before the great pit, and then closed those eyes when the sentence was read aloud. Into the Mouth, a tall ogre declared, for the killing of 2 members of the Black Moon clan. Arakamel had been home that morning when the 2 ogres who served Orakov, the lord of their clan, arrived on his family's land. He was there when his father spoke a single word to warn them from stepping further, and read the hesitation on their faces even as their feet continued to move. Now, as he stood atop the Mouth, his face still bore specks of dried blood from the moment his father drove a stone tool into their skulls. Seeing this mighty ogre kneeling at the edge of death, the same dread that rippled through Arakamel that morning returned with impelling terror. "No," he shouted. Steadily his father rose to his feet, whether planned or in response, none could say. The 6 or 7 guards scattered about the summit gripped their weapons till the wood groaned before taking a step toward him. Yet, before any could strike, his father spoke with a voice as calm as the rain. "Honor does not die, my sons." Without another word, he stepped back off the pit's edge, entering the belly of the Mouth without a single sound. Arakamel's eyes followed his father's body, his hands reaching in the air, falling helpless at his side. Now, the ready guards turned for his oldest brother. They did not make it far enough to touch him. It was Arakamel's eyes that changed first. Something clouded over them, a red that swirled for a moment before settling to a black as deep as the pit that consumed his father. With those eyes, he saw a familiar hesitation in the guards, and like his father, he took advantage of it. Though Arakamel was not fully grown, his ability to kill matured in an instant. In this moment, he was overwhelmed by the Dire, his body unable to yield until it was satisfied with vengeance. His movements were swift and vicious as a wild beast, And in dying, none of the guards would imitate his father's gracious silence. When the slaughter was complete, the only ogres left standing were Arakamel and his brothers. They dared not approach him, even as the black in his eyes began to recede. With few words, they implored him to flee Broken Maw and never return. As fear washed over him once more, Arakamel ran down the mouth, kicking dust in the dark and leaving his brothers to throw his victims into the pit. And that is the lore you know. So that's a wrap. Episode 107 is in the books. Hey, look, we're under an hour. Oh my gosh, what is going on?
Well, before the edition, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what? Unless I'm going to read a 10-minute lore piece, which I guarantee it's not, we're still going to be under an hour. But I hope you guys liked our little RP. Yeah, victory is ours. I hope you liked our little RP experience today. It was fun. It's always challenging to try and find new ways of delivering interesting content. So, let us know what you thought about it. If you want us to do something else and how you like it and whatnot. So, Desrin, as always, nice healing in the party and good job there.
Anytime, my friend.
Yeah, no reses is a good thing. So just a reminder, if you have a Pantheon-related question for Desrin and I, you can join our Discord. You can drop it in the Rewind mailbox channel, and we'll get to it on the show at some point. As well, if you have any fan art that you want featured on the show, we have a channel for that too. So just throw it in there, and we'd love to show it off. Anything Pantheon-themed for your artwork, so don't be shy. And with that, I'll say thanks for joining us today. And until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.
See you next time, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.